This episode of Signals in Higher Ed is sponsored by Podium Education, embedding real-world, high-impact experiences into the undergraduate degree for credit and at scale. For more information, go to podiumeducation.com. Hey, everybody. This is Darin Francis with Signals in Higher Ed, and I am proud to have a special guest, Dr. Jaime Windeler. She is the Associate Dean of Undergraduate Programs and Student Experience at the Carl H. Lindner College of Business at the University of Cincinnati. Jaime, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Darin. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So, as I mentioned before, we're having a conversation, basically a weekly podcast released for the last 5+ months and going for the next several months, really looking at experiential learning and looking at it from a bunch of different lenses. And so we've had folks from Strata Education on to talk about some of the work that they're doing with work integrated learning in different types of institutions. We've had Kristen Fox from Business Higher Ed Forum, several other university representatives from differing perspectives. And I'm excited to have somebody from within the business school who's doing experiential learning, I think in a pretty powerful way at the University of Cincinnati. So I'm grateful for you to talk to us today. But I wondered if we could start really for you at the wherever you'd like in your journey. But I know that going back to 2011, you've progressively kind of added to your portfolio and your experience, leading to the portfolio that you have today within the business school and within the college. So could you talk a little bit about your background and kind of what got you here to this role?
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to reflect on that. I probably don't do that enough, especially in my current role because it's like organized chaos with a calendar and popping my head up from time to time and looking around and looking back is really useful. So yeah, I came to the University of Cincinnati in 2011 as an assistant professor of information systems, um, and was excited to begin my journey as a researcher and as a teacher, and enjoyed that very much for 7 or so years and got tenure. And then I went on sabbatical in 2019, and I was living abroad in Australia when COVID-19 hit. And so that was a whole new learning experience and a new way to teach, to deliver content to students and just grapple with what we were all struggling with at that time. And when I came back and the world was still very much shut down, I began to experience what a lot of academics did, which was just kind of this malaise of feeling disconnected from my students, from my peers, my research colleagues, and and began kind of thinking about new opportunities that would resuscitate my career a little bit, kind of inject some new life and new challenge into it. And so I accepted the role of a interim department chair, and that was my first academic administrative leadership foray. Um, Learned a lot, had a really good time with that, but it didn't last very long. I did that for only a year when the role of associate dean of undergraduate programs opened up, and thought, well, this is a little bit early for me, earlier than I thought, but let's give this a try too. And when I stepped into that role, we didn't have a universal co-op or a co-op requirement in the college. It was really just a glimmer in the dean's eye. And one of my first charges was to implement that, to build that out. And experiential learning is fundamental to our co-op model. So that's kind of what got me here to EL through the university.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. And so you introduced the co-op model at the business school. Now we're looking back maybe 4 years ago, 3 years
Hmm.
ago.
Yes,
Okay. Yeah.
that's right.
And in order to I've only had a couple of conversations with people who have started something kind of fresh as opposed to taking something over. But I'm curious, in order to get to where you are today in 2026, what are some of the things that needed to occur in order for that co-op model to be formalized and put into place?
Yeah, I don't think anybody that I was in touch with at that time recognized the complexity of what needed to happen to move this forward. We had co-op in the college. Students were co-oping anywhere from, maybe 40, 50%, we think. But because it wasn't a requirement, students didn't always report to us that we were doing co-op. So the data was a little shaky. Um, so it was taking 40 to 50% to 100% and making that a graduation requirement. And so there was a lot of policy development that had to happen. What counts as a co-op? What happens if a student is, 75% of the way through a co-op and it doesn't work out for whatever reason? What do we do? I mean, those kind of little details in the weeds things were all things we had to figure out to make it a requirement. We had to build out infrastructure for evaluating the quality of these experiences as learning experiences in a way that we didn't have to before. So we've built lots of policy, nice long handbooks that nobody reads except for us when a rule gets violated. Um, and teams of people who, 3, 4 years ago we did not have that we now have that are supporting this endeavor.
Got it. So, yeah, I mean, I hadn't really thought about some of the complexity that you just mentioned, especially when it comes to just even tracking what was already there. Um, if you look at the sort of state of play today, are you now at 100%? Is that something you're still driving towards, or um, and I guess the other question is I'm really fascinated by how colleges and universities track experience.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm just curious how you do it.
Um, so one of the smarter things I did, and this was informed by my work and research experience in systems development, was I gave us a nice long runway to roll out the requirement successively to groups of students. So we started with a small group, our honor students, um, and began developing policies and testing those with them and refining them and iterating on them before we rolled it out with our first year students, before we rolled it out with transition and transfer students, before we rolled it out with online students. So we did that progressively. I think this year may be the year where all students have the requirement in place, but they have 4 years to meet the requirement. So we're just having our initial groups reaching graduation who have the requirement in place. But I would say the overwhelming majority of our student population have yet to get to graduation. So the data is still coming in. And from the get-go, we didn't expect that 100% of students would have a traditional co-op experience. Ever, let alone within the first 4 years. So we've been building out different pathways for students to meet that requirement that don't hinge just on the vagaries and volatility of the job market. There are implementations of experiential learning and co-op that are a little bit more controllable. Um, and figuring out other ways where students who have they work currently, those opportunities, those work experiences can be converted into experiential learning and count for co-op. So there's a lot of that kind of work happening to make sure that we can help every single student reach this requirement that we have set for them. um, Remind me of the
Sure.
second part of your question.
Yeah, it's just more about data tracking
Data
and
tracking, yeah.
understanding, like, because I would imagine that the data tracking is great to understand that someone got to 100%, but that the data tracking can also illuminate scenarios where maybe somebody's struggling. They've not gone through certain types of experiences yet, and that could be an indication of other concerns. And so I'm just wondering, like, A, how do you track it? And B, what are some of the insights you get along the way that help students succeed?
Yeah, that's a great question, and we're still evolving evolving it. So the basic structure or vehicle for tracking is a course that students enroll in when they get a co-op. And that course allows us to make sure that their experience is transcripted, and that we have touch points with them. We use our learning management system to check in with them while they're on their co-op. At certain points, we help them set goals for the experience. We have them reflect on those goals and just what they're learning. And then at the end of the experience, through this course, um, they kind of extract what they have learned and use it to update their resume, to capture what they got out of the experience. So that's the basic vehicle. A lot of the data that's generated, like in the reflection and the data that we collect at the end, we will mine for insights into the employer experience. How that there are sometimes employers that are not well set up to support co-op students, or at least not in the way that co-op is designed for. And so that's an important mechanism for learning and growth in supporting our employer partners and our students. Um, Occasionally we'll see, red flags or through some of that data when students are struggling, and we can intervene through our career services team. They keep a close eye on the students that they support. Um, and then in ensuring that over the course of 4 years, students are making good progress towards co-op, we have some alerts in place through our advising team where if a student gets to a certain point, a certain number of credit hours, and they have not co-opted yet, conversations begin happening, and the urgency and the question of what support is needed begin to get a little bit more urgent so that we're monitoring them along the student journey.
Great. That's yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I want to talk a little bit about employer partnerships and corporate engagement. But before then, kind of wanted to double click on the career services within the college because that's under your purview and your domain. And to this point, my conversations with career services on this topic have been within the larger university context. Yours being directly within the School of Business, I would imagine that affords you uh, some unique advantages. And I'm just curious, you know, what do you think that difference means in practice for students and employers, and how you run the program and how you've been able to sort of create the scaffolding of this co-op experience?
Yeah, now I'll give a little bit of our laundry here, because I think there's an important, I don't know if it's a lesson or insight. There's different ways that this can be done. The University of Cincinnati has a college of co-op and professional practice. They have a few degrees that they award, but primarily they are the central infrastructure for supporting co-op, and they support co-op for the entire university, and particularly have a lot of staff members dedicated to supporting students in the College of Engineering and in our College of Art. Um, and Lindner, the College of Business, is the only college that does not use their services. About 15 years ago, before my time, um, we made the decision to pull career services into the college. And that was a controversial decision. There was some animosity for a couple of years after that. It was not a popular move, but the rationale was that employers, especially in a cooperative model, are important to every college, but employer partners are essential lifeblood for colleges of business. And those relationships, the relationships between faculty and employer partners, between the college administration and employer partners, is absolutely critical. And we lose that when this important, our most important feature of the way that we deliver education is centralized to another unit. So that was really the rationale. Was we recognized that that was a piece we were losing touch with. And so what we built instead internally is a closed loop system. that's the benefit of having career services internal to the college, from the student to the experience that they have to the feedback from the employer, to adjustments that we then make to the student or with the student and to the experience. I can't say that that feedback loop doesn't have leaks. It absolutely does, and we're working on it. But what's nice about a closed loop system like that is that we can work on it. We can make those adjustments. We've got all the pieces, and if we need to build out a part of the team or move resources from student services to employer relations, we can do that, which makes us a lot more agile and reduces friction, I think, on both the student and the employer side.
That's great. And it makes sense in terms of a clear advantage of having that sort of in-house within the College of Business. Um, I'm wondering if you can also kind of shed light on what you think um, makes for effective corporate relationships. So, I mean, in this closed loop scenario you describe, you're able to have a pretty um, real time experience assessing the effectiveness of how you're serving those
Mhm.
institutional needs or those corporate needs. But yeah, like how do you assess an effective corporate relationship, and how do you kind of nurture it and create it? Because I think there's real pain at institutions around this topic.
Yeah, yeah, it's difficult. I mean, we have a dedicated team that does this, and it's not our career services team, funnily enough. It used to be, until very recently, our career services team was very much student facing, very much employer facing, and faculty facing as well. And it it worked okay while the team was relatively small and the college was smaller, but in the last few years, we've experienced a lot of growth. And so we've added staff members and a recognition that we needed more functional specialization in career services and with employer relations. So now we have a separate um, partnership team that they wake up every day and all they think about is what do our employers need? How do we connect with employers? How do we grow those relationships? And so that's been a critical piece of infrastructure for improving and scaling the number of quality employer partnerships that we have. Um, they almost act like kind of front door for our employers and getting them to the right opportunity. We try not to think about our employers just as hiring partners. We're moving toward thinking about them more as strategic partners, and um, and that means organizations that are consistently engaging in a wide variety of activities with us, including hiring, certainly. Um, but they may be a member of one of our centers and institutes. They might engage with us around executive education for upskilling or reskilling. They might partner with us to come into the classroom or provide projects to students, present to our students, sponsor events, scholarships. There's just so many different ways. And our tightest, best partners engage with us across almost all of those things. And that requires good people, just kind, giving, dedicated people on both sides of that equation, and a desire on both sides to keep creating value for one another. Um, and I think that's what makes those relationships work.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I work with startup companies, helping them understand how to work with institutions, and it's in a different context than this, but effectively we arrive at the same thing. I call it co-readiness, right? Where both the startup founder and company and the institution are arriving at the same place at the same time, you
Yeah.
know. And yeah, somebody has to go first, but there has to be just a very mutual uh, experience of readiness. And I use readiness because you might love a concept, but it might not fit into where you're headed in the next 3 years strategically, right? And
Yep.
so it's not just can we convince you that this is a great idea? It's more are we both ready? And I feel like you're reflecting that in your very mature relationships with these corporate partners. Um,
Well, and I think that's one of the reasons why the building of those relationships can take time that I'm sure is frustrating for external partners, where you feel each other out, right? And it takes time to uncover the problems that you each have and whether or not those connect, and if you're in the right place of readiness to solve those problems together. Um, and yeah, that takes a lot of talking and meeting and figuring one another out. And sometimes it doesn't work out, which is also frustrating.
sure, sure. Um, yeah, and I'm really interested in this sort of separate partner team function that you've created. Uh, what do you feel like the fully developed version of that looks like at its best? I mean, do you feel like because it feels like you've been sort of building something out on the co-op side that's been scaling and so growing the need for a lot of the partner engagement at the same time that you've really focused on these partnerships. And I appreciate that you've also clearly said, hey, some of the best partnerships look like this. But do you feel like there are maybe other elements of how your team engages with new partners or kind of a framework for how they understand and engage um, partnerships and that are not quite at that quote ready state, right? But they're continuing to grow those because obviously you have to some degree scale this, and it feels like
Yeah.
you've built this team to do that.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
any other insights in that space for us?
Um, so I think when it's working really well, our team and the organization's, partners, the people that we're partnering with are meeting fairly regularly to talk about strategic needs. Um, we're, people within Lindner are beginning to make connections with people across those companies. So the relationship bleeds beyond the initial dyad or small group of people um, that initially meet to talk about a potential partnership. And that makes the bleeding or probably uh, the expansion of those relationships makes the overall partnership more entrenched, more sticky, more multifaceted. It uncovers more opportunities for partnership. And there's, an honest and transparent flow of information, what's working, and what's not working. Like we rely on these partners quite a lot to tell us, what aspects of, our students are needing adjustment, where we need to make adjustments in our curriculum. There was a huge disruption of education during COVID, and our employer partners, as well as in faculty in the classroom, were helping us see some of the acute problems that arose from that kind of isolation and stress, um, and and they were able to express it, articulate it in a way that we couldn't exactly see because they see our students in a different environment and a different light. So that honesty is critical. And that's what it looks like when it's working well. Those kind of strategic partnerships, I would say, are often with partners, what the big co's, right? Like the Fifth Thirds and the Great Americans and the Cintas, the big companies in Cincinnati. We're trying right now as we think about scale, about how to partner better with our SMEs that are in the local region. Small and medium enterprises have different needs, certainly, and a different degree of readiness for engaging across all of those areas that I've mentioned. So we'll often start with co-op and try to help them figure out how to make it work for them. These places often have an HR department of one. And so they're just not, they don't have the bandwidth, they don't have the processes in place for like temporary short-term student hiring. So we try to support them in that way and then figure out over time as the relationship matures, what other ways can we be of value to you and what other opportunities are there to partner.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I know just through getting to know a lot of the companies in this space that Ripen stands out as a company that, if you look at, I think they have something like 40,000 employers, and it might be globally. I'm not certain. But the vast majority are actually more like startups and much smaller. And it's a I think for them it's a function of, oh, wait a minute, we've got this big marketing project. We've got to launch this thing. We've got this team of 10 or 5 or whatever. And so they're really seeing the ability to leverage, you know, I don't know, the micro internship or whatever you want to call it, and through a ripen experience, say, um, as you know, as sort of free work, right? Like
Mhm.
they're like, oh, we can. Now there are some pluses and minuses to like how that occurs, right? But I do wonder, in a world where there certainly are greater incentives, given employment trends, for people to start small businesses. If if that doesn't become a bigger piece, the SME piece of
Mm.
your of your portfolio on some level, because there's real projects to do, and if you can find, to your point, that co-readiness, um, with those employers, um, yeah, it would be a great thing to unlock.
Yeah,
Um,
it is. I think it's a big part of the answer to our problem of scale or our challenge of scale. And it's not an easy answer because it requires a lot more customized solutions or customized approaches. And so, um,
mm,
and it just is going to require more volume as well as we begin to think about adding more pathways to meet co-op requirements. We're talking about stackable or micro co-op experiences, so fractional credits. Maybe it's a 4-week, project or even a 2-week project sprint, working with an SME or a nonprofit or a startup. Um, instead of finding one experience for a student under this model, we now have to find four of those. And
oh,
each
right.
of those, fractional experiences are going to carry, have different needs, have different people to coordinate with, um, have variability in the student experience that we may have to manage, as well as the employer experience. So um, it it's an answer, and it opens up a problem of complexity that I talk about with my team just about every day.
Yeah, yeah. No, that makes sense. And I wonder, because you're looking at this from the lens of a undergraduate student experience. Um, I wonder if do you think about the scaffolding of experiences working in a way that one prepares you for the next, right? So maybe in that first year experience, I I need to get exposure to a bunch of different, um, possibilities, right? That either reinforce my major choice, or and what I'm considering in terms of career options, or helps me wrestle through some of some of that early anxiety in your first
Yeah.
year. Clearly there's always retention issues in year one if you have retention issues, so there's that. But then there's also just sort of giving students experiences that might lead to, a capstone, or lead to that broader co-op later. Like, do you think of it that way? Are there ways to frame, when you have 4 years with a student, are there ways to sort of frame it in that way? Or I'm just curious how you even
Yeah,
try and structure it.
I think it was just last week, in fact, we were talking about, so we have a cross-functional team that we call the Co-op Hub, and that is has representatives from our Department of Experiential Learning and Teaching Excellence, which is like our more faculty-facing team, partnership, career services, co-curricular, and academic programs. So it's a team of about 6 people, I think. And we're talking about um, how we create that scaffold and what are some typical profiles that we could think about of a student, John Q student who starts in their freshman year and has, in our first year experience, we have actually a big part of it is project strategy, where we invite about 60 corporate partners to come into the classroom. We pair them with teams of students. The students do a pretty basic SWOT analysis over the course of the semester. They meet with the corporate partner a couple of times, and at the end of the semester, they present their analysis. And so that's a pretty low stakes structured way for students to get kind of exposure, especially with that presenting in front of a corporate audience. Get, develop those skills, get those nerves out, grow that confidence. What does it look like, in the summer, the first summer for John Q student? What does it look like in their sophomore year? What are the additional co-op or experiential learning intensive experiences that they're having? And I expect that we will identify a couple of different models based on, different disciplines are going to have, if you're accounting, it's always going to be a spring co-op. So the different disciplines have different structures. And students who, our traditional first year freshman is going to have a different co-op experience than a student who works full time throughout their college experience. We also have about 50% of our students who transfer in to the college after the freshman year. So juniors and seniors, they come to us and finish out, their junior, senior year. They have a much compressed timeline to get those experiences in. And so we have to think about how we can structure them in the curriculum so that they don't miss those opportunities because they didn't start with us. Um, and um, and just what they need at that point in their development is different than what a freshman needs. So
Yeah.
it's a lot.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you're really, I think that's part of why I started to lean into the data question earlier,
Mm.
because I mean, in my mind, I feel like you need to be able to process a clear level of data, but now you've got all these signals, right? Transfer students and first gen students and students that you know who are working and that are having a different experience. They're taking it at a different pace, whatever the case might be. Someone that enrolls late, a lot of different elements. Um, when you picture a student who's most challenged by going through co-op or one of these experiential pathways that you've built, who is that person? What situation is going on that you're aware of, or what's different um, for them uh, on the other side of having this kind of experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think about the students most without inherited access. The students who don't know the hidden rules, they haven't built professional confidence. They may not have much self-confidence yet. And that is really on display when they're talking in a professional setting where they just aren't yet equipped for it. Um, and I think why cooperative education is such a powerful model is the extent of transformation that can occur in such a short period of time. Um, from uncertainty, avoidance, to confidence navigating ambiguity. And we see it every year when our first year students come in, and you have plenty of those students in that cohort, and just how quickly many of those students get in terms of confidence and comfort um, after one presentation. Um, it's pretty power. I mean, it's not the one presentation that does it. It's the all of the conversation that leads up to it, with the faculty, with their peers, with their peer mentors, and with the employer partners who come into the classroom. But it's profound and it's quite quick, and it's just incredible to watch, and then to see that build over time as they move on to other experiences. Um, and then, the vision is the success is by the time they graduate, they're not just confident and comfortable, but their ambition has grown. What they see as possible for themselves, um, is radically different, and that's just so exciting. I mean, I think that's why a lot of educators are in this game.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, for sure. I'm helping a young founder right now with she's releasing a really interesting AI based assessment platform. And it was
Mm,
initially as an instructor, she recognized that, like, you know, the issues around authentic assessment are real within the age of AI. And so she started attacking that problem. And she built a really nice solution that I think can help address certain use cases. But what's been interesting is that I'll call it, there's like this shadow self of the student. Like there's the data that she collects on the student in terms of their answers to a solution, or to a quiz, to a test, whatever the assessment is. And then there's, through the way, like she'll often use like oral assessment, but through that she's also sort of picking up on, um, what I've been directing her to is looking at it from like a standpoint of like durable skills, or like the NACE competencies,
mm,
um, to because she's starting to assess what she's calling true interest.
mm,
And and but as she kind of goes deeper, she's realizing that as students take different assessments through this platform, she's getting a more, she's capturing a more holistic picture of the student beyond the assessment, right? And um so we're just thinking about it from that angle of like there are just these other elements. And I think you're talking about it, right? That student who's most likely to see the greatest, who's most likely to have the biggest struggles initially with co-op, or even just with the academic environment generally, when they have the right support structure in place in a co-op model, the benefits are are 10x that
yeah,
those of others, right?
yeah.
Um so it's really neat to, I think, as we were presented with new challenges around AI and different things, there's real, I think there's a lot more to unlock about the academic experience and what that's really giving a student. And as you get into experiential learning, and you're seeing all of that, I think, in real time. um
What,
but I
what I'm
wanted to,
hearing,
yeah, go ahead.
oh, well, what I'm hearing you describe, or it, to put that in the language of what we sometimes talk about, it's metacognition. It's not just that they build the skills to know how to present professionally. They build awareness of the fact that they have built those skills. And that awareness of how far they've come and what they've learned and how it's transformed them is a deeper kind of confidence than just learning the rote skills. It's like the difference between knowledge and wisdom almost. And it's much stickier, and it's much more portable to different contexts, and I think that's so powerful. I'm curious in what you're describing with the person that you're mentoring, if that feedback is given back to the students.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And actually, maybe offline I'll share more with you on this, because it's very early, but uh it's a really interesting use
Yeah, I
case.
would love to, I would love to hear
I'll,
more.
I'll give a shout out to her. It's Allison at a company called Curiously. She's a faculty member at Columbia University and been working in AI for a while. But um but uh but yeah, no, this is helpful. So, and actually I wanted to talk to you a little bit about AI for a minute. Um because as I was talking to Kristen Fox at Business Higher Ed Forum, we talked a little bit about how, you know, there's real pressure on the entry level positions, right? And due to AI. But from where you sit, connecting students to real work right now. What's your read on that? Like, where do you see the opportunity or the challenges are the headlines true? Are there are there other things to be worried about?
Yeah.
What's your take?
Um, AI, the headline that it is changing entry-level jobs is absolutely true. The nature of that change, I think, is still unfolding, and it's going to be different for different industries. So there probably won't be a super succinct, nice, tidy headline um, about it that is really very meaningful, I think. Routine tasks are shrinking, judgment and adaptability are increasing in value. So co-op has to develop thinking and those qualities, not just the ability to do. So I think it can, will, and continue to change the nature of the work that's happening in entry-level jobs. I think entry-level jobs will still exist, but they will just look very different. What we're seeing on the ground that I'm not sure, I think like Nace, Sean, I can't remember his name, Vander something. He talked about this that employers are saying they want AI from students in co-ops and internships. But when you ask the students who come back from a co-op or internship, did you use AI? They're saying no, not really. And when we ask our recruiters, they'll tell us we want students with AI, and we'll say, okay, how? What kind of AI? Like, what do you want them to do with the AI? Um, they're pretty vague, and I think that's just reflective of the fact that we all know it's very, very important, but how it's going to embed and in organizations, how it's going to change jobs is unknown and unfolding. And so it's like trying to catch a star. It just it resists and defies because of the speed of change, much distillation into any, tidy job description. And because it's not well articulated or difficult to articulate in a job description, when students get into their co-ops, um, the extent to which they're using AI or expected to use AI is uh, uneven at best, I would say. So I think that resonates with what NACE is saying about what they're seeing from students coming back. Um, but it doesn't change the fact that the message that we hear from employers all day, every day is we want them to have AI skills. So that's what we're working on. And I
Yeah.
think hopefully we'll close the gap between um, the overall need and the specific manifestation or the specific skills that they're going to require in the next couple of years.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm sure this conversation won't age well on AI. We'll have some different perspective on it at some point too. But I really value getting your take on the ground today because it is where we are. It is an accurate reflection of where things are today, and um, uh, you know, excited and apprehensive at the same time, I guess.
Yeah.
But uh, like I kind of want to close out a little bit more thinking um, about how you scale through partnerships versus building in-house. Everybody has to make these decisions. They're trade-offs to some degree, or it's the classic build versus buy model that everybody's kind of coming across when you have something significant going on, like trying to give this very thoughtful level of co-op experience to every student. Um, and I'm curious from your standpoint, are there just is it obvious to you where you naturally plug in a partner and where you build on your own kind of through your existing processes?
Um, it's not obvious. And sometimes when I think it's obvious and then we start walking down that path, it becomes clear that it's not the right call. And I think that reflects the challenge of clearly articulating a problem, um, which is why personally, I tend to avoid sales calls and emails saying, here's this great product. Um, I like to understand my problem first and then go searching for a product. And I know that's what marketing people don't want to hear, but I think if presented with a product that could solve some potential problem, I maybe won't have my conceptualization of the problem won't be as clear as if I know the problem and go searching for the solution. I say to my team, don't outsource what you don't understand. Like you have to understand the problem first, and that sounds much easier to do than it actually is. I mean, we have a scholarship financial management problem right now that we've probably spent the past year just figuring out the right questions to ask to design a solution, a system to support. Um, so I think that just takes time and it takes brain power and it takes conversations. And then I think the other, like, other than, understanding the need, I would say I tend not to seek external partnership or solutions for things that are core to identity and value that we offer. It's just too dangerous to outsource those things. We may seek support for small pieces, small slices of it. Um, but if we hired an external company to do all of co-op, that would be a huge risk factor and I think a mistake for the college. It has to be like deeply embedded. Um, but aside from those two things, I appreciate external partners a lot. They can be much more agile than we can be, especially lately with a lot of the changes in legislation nationally and in the state of Ohio um, that have changed the speed with which we can make changes. Um, and they're not constrained by those things. So we need them. Um, and fortunately, we've found some that understand universities very well, which is so critical. Like we're very different than corporate environments, and universities, there are different models of universities and how they govern as well. So if a vendor works with multiple institutions, I think they have to be ready to understand the idiosyncrasies and the challenges of the different institutions. And we've been fortunate to find some of those partners.
Yeah. No, that's great. Um, I work with a lot of those hopeful future partners, whether they be startups or companies further down the path. I always like to end thinking about this for that audience. So I've most of what I think we've been talking about today, I think applies to everybody, but is hopefully a bit of a framework or a guide or a launch path for I think a lot of our academic partners to think about how to explore um, their own framework and strategy for co-op and experiential learning. Um, but yeah, in if we end a little bit on the partner side, you gave me a lot in that last answer because it I do find that in higher ed, um, yeah, you go seeking for the problem after you understand it well. And I liked the don't outsource what you don't understand. I think that's like solid wisdom here. But now talk about the reality of like what makes, so let's say you got through that, you selected a partner. What makes that partnership good? I mean,
Okay.
examples or just even in the abstract, either is good just to understand like how partnerships can be can help you sort of 10x something or how partnerships can even get in the way. Like I'm
Yeah.
just curious, like,
Um, I'll give you the general, and then I'll give you a specific example of what I think, you get past all of that and what good ongoing partnership looks like. Um, I greatly appreciate partners who are interested in helping me solve problems beyond the problem that their product was explicitly designed for. Um, so to give an example of that, we have a great partnership with Podium Education. They have a product called the Global Career Accelerator. It's an online asynchronous experiential learning platform. And the first time that Chris, the CEO, came and presented to me, I was like, that sounds really impressive, very cool. This is not the problem that I have right now. I need to scale co-op, and this isn't going to help me do that. And we kindly parted ways. And then he came back later at some point and said, what if we could try to help you solve this co-op problem? And so I said, I'm interested. And so we talked about ways that the Global Career Accelerator experience could be almost like a training ground for a student to then get a co-op. And Podium was willing to try to explore its own employer network as potential opportunities for students who had gone through the Global Career Accelerator, Lindner students only, college business students only, because this was an experiment. We were running it together. It's something that they hadn't done before. It's not the way that their product or model was set up exactly, but it still plugged into what they did, and they were willing to consider an expansion in order to help us solve a problem. And so it's that kind of willingness to help solve problems and explore that makes a good partner. That specific potential solution is not working out the way we thought it could or might, but we're continuing to explore and continuing to work together. And that makes that relationship feel more like an extension of my team, an extension of the college, versus an external vendor that we pay something to and they provide a product to us. Um, and so there's that willingness that's really important. And then that extension is built on a good relationship. I mean, Chris reaches out to me from time to time. We've just had two members of his team here at the university helping us um, launch a early career competition with Procter and Gamble, and they helped kind of support that, the logistics, and help us make that happen. So um, good people and a willingness to experiment and work together, I think are the two things that I find make a really successful partnership.
I think that's a great example, and I'd only underscore that. I think one of the things that I try and help founders and CEOs understand is that you really need to stay involved. A lot of times, because as you grow, I mean, I know Podium has something, I don't know, 100 plus institutional partners,
Mhm.
and Chris Parrish is still showing up and meeting with existing clients and future clients. He's staying very involved in
Yeah,
that process, and I think so. It's certainly no comment on him. He's doing great. But I do think that a lot of CEOs, when they're met with the challenges of running and scaling a business, they're like, "Oh, I'm going to hand this off," you know.
hmm,
And I think what I think you don't realize sometimes how much you're actually handing off.
yeah,
Um, it's not just handing off something transactional. You're handing
right.
off the partnership on a level that um, you're probably not ready to do yet. And so I think it's great when a company of that size and scale is having success, but still staying that deeply involved at the senior leadership level. Um,
Agree.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, that's great. Well, is there anything that I didn't ask you that we didn't cover? Because I feel like you've given me a really solid view into the work you've been doing, especially over the last 3 or 4 years on co-op.
Um, we covered a lot of ground. I think I've been thinking about a question that I get a lot recently. Like I get it a lot from other leaders at other institutions when I'm at conferences and so on that could be worth mentioning. The question is super high level. It's how do you do co-op? It's like how does it work? How can you possibly do that? And I think what a lot of people are wondering is how can you integrate that into your curriculum and your course scheduling, which most administrators feel is already pretty tight. And what I think isn't immediately apparent is that there are two ways to integrate co-op into a curriculum, um, a lockstep method and flexible pathways. And the lockstep method is what our College of Engineering and Art do, which is where students take like 2 semesters of classes and then co-op in the summer, 2 semesters of classes and co-op in the summer. Um, our approach is students can co-op anytime. They can do full-time, they can do part-time, they can co-op and take classes together, or just full-time co-op, or just full-time classes. Um, and what I like about that approach is it doesn't flood a co-op market with students in every summer. And opportunities are spread around. So it's not quite so competitive between students every summer to get co-ops. And employers can get access to students when they need them, um, not just in summers. So I love the approach that we use. However, what I think would make some administrators break out in hives is the hidden cost of that approach. We have to offer certain courses every single semester, online and in person. Um, so students can stay on track academically, and you need to have a certain size of faculty and staff to afford to be able to schedule classes that way. So scale is very much an enabler in that case. And I would say a smaller institution, the lockstep method may be more feasible. Um, and that the other hidden cost is that it does reshape the culture and feel of the college. And I think you have to be here sometime and maybe even be at another institution to feel the difference. But students regularly cycling between campus and co-op, you lose continuity and relationships among students, among faculty and students, within student organizations. It's just harder to sustain because they're constantly leaving us and then coming back. And we want them to do that, but it does change the culture. Like, a campus experience that feels very cloistered and very like traditional student life would be challenged. I mean, it would require some change in culture to absorb this kind of model. And I think those are the things that aren't clear how you pull off if you're thinking about embracing co-op. So
That's a yeah, I like the hidden cost component. Definitely things that wouldn't have been on my radar if you wouldn't have mentioned it. Um, yeah, it feels like where you can maximize opportunities for experience online keeps a level of um, consistency culturally and otherwise on campus,
yeah.
um, but then when you're trying to give students that full co-op experience, you've got these trade-offs if you're letting it happen whenever.
Yeah, and the more
Yeah,
immersive and embedded they are, which is what we want, which is great for learning, the less embedded they can be in student life and, the life of the college. So it's a trade-off, but it's one that we think is worthwhile.
yeah. Well, a lot to think about. I really appreciate you taking the time, Jamie. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I look forward to others getting the chance to see this, but also look forward to staying in touch as well.
I look forward to that as well. This has been a great conversation. I appreciate it greatly.
All right. Thanks again.
Thanks.